Call the meeting to order, the Palm Springs International Airport Commission. Good morning.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Right, the agenda has been posted.
It has, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Nadia, could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioners Adams, Altman, President, Medillo,
Here.
Burke,
Present.
Clarkson,
Here.
Corcoran,
Here.
Dada excused, Feldman,
Here.
Freeman, Edrick,
Here.
Kern,
Here.
Hughes excused, Patterson, Pye, Reason,
Here.
Schmitz,
Here.
Swerow, Chairman Jones excused.
Thank you, Nadia.
Is there someone by phone?
I'm sorry?
Not a commissioner, that is a consultant.
Consultant on the phone. Yes. The acceptance of the agenda, are there any changes to the agenda? No, Mr. Chairman? The agenda has been accepted. Now we go to public comments. Comments are limited to 3 minutes on any subject within the purview of the commission. I've received a number of requests here. I'm going to ask them in order as I have received them. And I would like to ask that people do stick to the 3 minutes, please. The first name is James Giantoni, if I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Please.
Hi, good morning. I live in Mountain Shadows along with Cecilia and Smitty. If you don't know where Mountain Shadows is, you know where the Walmart is. We're 1.1 miles south of the Walmart, right across from Tockwoods Country Club. We are in the landing pattern of the airport. We are the last residents in the Coachella Valley to be passed over by an airplane before it lands. So you have to understand, and I recognize you folks don't live at Mountain Shadows, so you aren't experiencing what we experience every day around the clock. And that is low-flying planes that at times can shake paintings on your wall. Okay, folks? So, what I'm asking as part of our group is, and please don't laugh at my map, it's pretty simple, but this is Mountain Shadows. This is Golf Club Drive. I don't know if you all know where that is, but that's the street that runs along the Walmart. Walmart's up this way. Mountain Shadows Golf Club Drive, the 17th fairway of Tockwoods, the 18th fairway of Tockwoods. The planes right now are going completely over all of Mountain Shadows. My house being one of the last ones that goes over, and directly over my house actually. And they come over all these residences to land. What I'm asking is we take the planes rather than going over all these residences, move them 50 feet across the road over the golf course. That way none of us are being affected by the soot and the noise and the vibrations, and it's going over a golf course where no one's being disturbed. So all we're asking for is cross the road and bring the plane in. It doesn't change the landing area. It doesn't change the trajectory. You still have all your landmarks you can work off of as a pilot. And I really hope you folks would give it some strong consideration. Again, put yourself, walk in our shoes, living there every day with planes landing on your roof. It's not fun. And that could be eliminated just going over the golf course. So I hope I made my 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you.
I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I take questions or?
No.
No? Okay.
The next is Celia Hart.
Good morning, everyone. We came this morning because we didn't know where to start. So we were hoping, sure. And so we were hoping that we could start networking with someone and get some of our concerns addressed. I too live in Mountain Shadows. I bought there knowing that it was an approach. Don't have a problem with the planes at all, except the military. We all have that. So my concern is over the last few years, a couple of things have happened. One is the planes are coming in much lower. Some of these guys can almost touch our rooftops. The other thing is we're getting a lot of soot. This is my back patio shelf last night. And this is what we deal with every day now. It's not sand we wipe off our outdoor furniture anymore, it's soot. And that soot is a concern. I actually have a permanent address in Seattle. The University of Washington is doing studies on the effect of this soot on residents, and they're finding that people are getting sick. I'm not claiming that, it's just that this is something that's coming up now, and I think there's a way to have them come in at a different approach, not come in as low, I don't know. That's why we're here, to try to find out. The only other thing is, several weeks ago, as I was driving in, one of our streets is called Arroyo, and right down the middle of Arroyo is coming a plane, very low. I'm going to guess it was an Alaska, but it was a lighter blue than the normal Alaska, and I couldn't see. But all of a sudden, out of the belly of the plane is a whole bunch of stuff coming out. I know it's not fuel, didn't come out of the wingtips, but it came out of the belly of the plane. Landing gear was already down, so I'm clueless, but is there a way to report those incidents, and is there someone to whom we can report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celia. Next, we have Michael Kaw.
Good morning. I'm here in my capacity today as chairman of the steering committee for the information desk volunteers. I want to extend an invitation to the commissioners to take a stint, do a stint at the information desk when your time warrants. This would be Monday, Tuesday, or Friday, 10 to 2. And we would welcome anyone who wants to try their hand there. It's an important way to see how the airport functions and what our customers, how they see the airport and what they think they need. My email address is callml2102@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we have Jeremy Ogle.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jeremy Ogle. Excuse me, I'm here on behalf of my client, Ace Parking. As you know, Ace Parking has operated at this airport for over 14 years, nearly 15 years, providing excellent service and at a very competitive rate to the city and for the airport. So recently, as you know, there was an RFP process to identify a contractor for the airport, and quite frankly, we were surprised with the results, the outcome of that RFP process. But we understand that the city and the airport have the right, the prerogative to shop around every once in a while. So, you know, that's business, right? But then we took a closer look at the winning proposal, and we actually started to get concerned. We ran the numbers that were in this proposal, and believe that there are actually some serious flaws in the proposal that's before you today on your agenda. I passed out some slides that just give some background on on ACE parking and their operations and what was in ACE's proposal. But we had some concerns with the proposal that won. And so this morning, before the meeting started, we filed a formal protest letter with the city procurement and contracting officer. And so we're just here this morning to let you know what's going on, what our concerns are, and to ask you that you recommend that the city council take a closer look at this proposal, at this contract before approving it. And I'm going to invite Steve Burton, who's the president of ACE Parking, up here to go into the details about the numbers. But before that, I wanted to introduce you to a couple of the ACE Parking employees, a couple of the longest serving employees that we have here, and I think it's important that you hear from them because ultimately, you're responsible for the finances, but those finances impact people, and people are important to us, they're important to the airport, they're important to the customers. So you're going to hear from Bob Learned and Jane Moses, two of the employees, and then after that, you'll hear from Steve Burton, who can give you a little bit more detail on the issue that we raised.
Thank you. Next I have Ed Learned. I'm sorry?
Yeah, shouldn't any reference to ACE parking or whatever should be part of the discussion item 11C?
Correct.
And not as part of opening minutes, as part of general comments?
Well, I mean, people have the right to make public comments. We don't need to address those at the during that period, but we can then refer to that during the when we get to the agenda point.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ed Learned. I live here in Palm Springs. I've worked in the parking industry for, it's almost 35 years now. Had an opportunity to work at different airports. Worked my way up from assistant manager to my last company. I was vice president of operations. In 2010, I decided to retire. Moved back home after all those years on the road. And I kind of quickly got bored back there in Massachusetts. 2011 was a fun year because we had all the natural disasters, including a tornado. Decided to move out here in California and take my chance with earthquakes. Anyway, I've worked out here now since 2011. I was the manager for a number of years. When I first came out here, I had the opportunity to work with the employees. I've been out here now going on to my 9th year. And then my health went south, so I had to dial it back a little bit. ACE took the opportunity and helped me out with insurance and such. So I've had the privilege of staying on and working in a part-time as-needed basis. Recently been working a little more, but I just want to say it's a good company to work for. They take care of their employees. And I think they do a good job here at the airport. I had the opportunity to work at a number of airports around the country, and their dedication to what the administration needs and operations needs, I think has been very, very helpful to the airport. So that's it for my comments. I just hope to be able to continue to work for you folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Jane Moses.
Testing again. Try to use the mic if you can.
Good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you I know by name or by face, it's good to see you again this morning. My name is Jane Moses. I work as a cashier down front at the exit room. I wait on the customers when they come through, Some of them are funny, and joke, have a few exchange words, and they move on. I've been here for 14 years. I'm more worried about my job. I love working here, and seeing you people makes me feel good. It's hard to explain for the way I've worked. I've been deaf all my life, but yet I do great in communicating with all of you. Looking at you, doing some sign language a little bit. But we've all been courteous and polite with each other. We have our days when things aren't going right, but that doesn't mean we gotta walk away. We can work it out and keep it going. Ace has been one of the best parking spaces that I've ever worked for. I've worked for other companies, and they haven't given me half the enjoyment that I get out of here. Me working at the airport is a lot of adventures for everybody. And I'm happy and proud to work with them and have the honor that the airport took us in. Let's keep it that way, where we all can work together. There's nothing in life that can't be worked out. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Jane. Steve Burton.
Discussion.
Right. Please stay within the 3-minute limit.
Perfect. My name is Steve Burton. I'm the president of Ace Parking. I've headed up our airport division since the early 90s. I've had the pleasure of overseeing this airport and the team and some of the members that you've met for nearly 15 years. And we didn't get to see the competitor's proposal until Monday, but it didn't take long to see some of the areas where we think that they missed. 4 years ago, about 5 years ago, when we proposed on the RFP, we proposed cutting some of the staffing, including some cashiers and different things. And because we said we could automate, we've got automation, we're bringing in new technology. Well, it appears that our competitor has done that and not explained it very well in their proposal. So it is interesting that it looks like they're missing 3,000 to over 3,500 hours that are typically in this proposal or in this operation on an annual basis. It was clear in the RFP with the schedule or attachment I what the minimum staffing hours were. It was addressed in multiple addendums as various proposers asked questions. And it's clear if you were to go back and take a hard look, there's nothing in their proposal about attendance or starters, so you don't really know what you're buying for that price that you're making the determination on who the lowest qualified bidder is, when in reality, we know exactly what needs to be staffed, and we're basically about 22,000 a year less than, or higher than they were, but they're missing a lot of hours. So I think you really need to look at that and make sure you want to have that level of customer service that we provide. Most of the operations staff know that 85 to over 90% of our transactions are 1 to 2 hours. Those individuals that are not going to go to a pay station and use a credit card for $2 or to $4 or $5. They come and they want to go through a lane that has a cashier or something they can interact with, quickly get out. Yesterday I watched them, 90% of them don't ask for receipts. It's boom, 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 in and out. So you're going to be out there with somebody who's got to meet this magic management fee number and cover all their costs. The only way to do that is to cut staffing and make things work. So again, remember, things are going to change. If you've gone through our PowerPoint, this is one of the friendliest airports in the country. We operate several of those in the country. In 2019, Phoenix Sky Harbor, one of the top 6 or 7 airports size-wise in the country, #1 on Wall Street Journal. In San Diego, unfortunately, only came in 6th, so we run that one as well. But there's a whole other poll that measures about 26 factors that has San Diego as also a #1 airport. So again, I'll finish quickly, but I really ask the commission here to rethink, or at least have staff go back and take a look at the RFP, the scoring, and in particular, how somebody could get to a cost basis that's $22,000 a year less than mine, when I know what it takes to operate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes the public comments, and we can move on to the next agenda item, and that is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of January 8th.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Any changes to the minutes? Any edits? None. All in favor of accepting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. No abstentions? None. Thank you. Next item is Chairman's report. I don't really have any reports except to actually bring greetings from the chairman who is unable to be here today. So we'll move on to introductions and presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy day. We have mentioned in the past how we are proceeding, Mr. Chairman, with the airline use and lease agreement that has been in place for quite some time. That expires the end of this year. We have previously reported how Recondo Associates is the consultant hired by City Council to lead that process. So today, we're apparently at about 20-25% through or into the process, and Brian Elliott joins us by phone from the East Coast. Good morning, Brian.
Morning, Tom. How are you?
Very good. So what he wanted to do today was to provide an overview of where we stand in his assessment. Brian, the floor is yours. Mark, feel free to interject whenever possible. Just speak nice and loud.
Well, thank you, Tom. Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Commission. As Tom indicated, my name is Brian Elliott. I'm a director with the consulting firm of Recondo Associates. And I hope on the screen you can see our slide presentation, which currently is the cover slide. I'd like to transition to the next slide, which is kind of an overview of the areas that I'd like to cover with you this morning. First, Tom has requested that I provide a little bit of background on our firm, discuss current airline rate-making methodologies that are used to set rates and charges for airlines at airport across the country. We asked also to provide an overview of the current airport airline use and lease agreement for Palm Springs, provide a quick overview of the goals going into this next agreement, provide a forecast of key financial metrics, and discuss the key thing that the airlines look at, and that is their cost per plane per passenger. So we'll have a comparative slide, not only of the two methodologies, one that's currently in play for the airport and also the one that is proposed going forward, and then close with discussion and answering any questions you may have. To the next slide, Recondo Associates, who we are. Our firm has been doing work for the Palm Springs International Airport in the city since 2016. We were selected to provide on-call airport business and financial consulting services. Over the past 3 years or so, we've assisted the city with its PFC application for the ticketing wing project. We prepared the financial feasibility report for the bonds that were issued in support of that project. We've assisted with rates and charges, development of an analysis, both historical and forecast, and we're currently on the Gensler team that is evaluating the Palm Springs Consolidated Rental Car Facilities Program and Planning. So you can see on the screen several key points. We serve one industry, aviation. That's our sole focus, and it's completely on airports. We have about 175 employees. Our firm is based in Chicago. We have offices across the U.S. and international. You can see that we're also an independent company owned completely by its employees, and we provide services both domestically and internationally. Now, transitioning a little bit to rate-making methodologies, the next slide, and why this is important. Essentially today, and all of this falls back in many respects and is kind of girded by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration's policy on airline rates and charges. Airline rates and charges for airports are set a number of different methodologies. The most common ones we see for small hub airports, like Palm Springs, are residual, hybrid, and compensatory. Based on our review of data provided by ACI-NA, which is a national aviation interest group that supports airports across the country, that surveys airports every year on various matters, 67% of current small hub airport agreements are tied to a hybrid methodology, and I'll get into a moment what that entails. 22% use a residual methodology, and that's currently what is at play at Palm Springs, and 11% use a compensatory model. So what's the difference between the three methodologies that are depicted here? First, on a residual, and again, this is the methodology that's been in place at Palm Springs for almost over 20 years now, and is currently in use at the airport. Basically, the airlines in this model serve as the financial backstop for the airport financially. And they do that essentially by assuming that and using all non-airline revenue that's generated on the airport and crediting that non-airline revenue against what is owed by the airline. So it's net of the expenses are covered net of all the non-airline revenue that's generated on the airport. In exchange for the airlines agreeing to be that financial backstop, the airlines have a more strict control, if you will, of capital expenditures. You can imagine that the airlines in this model, well, in all models, are keenly in tune with expenditures, how the money is, how the airport is spending its money, why it is spending its money, and a big part of that is capital expenditures. And so they are willing to accept the risk of taking on losses or shortages in non-airline revenue in exchange for having more control over expenditures. And so in a nutshell, that's essentially what residual is. A compensatory approach is basically like a shopping mall. An airport will determine the cost of an asset, in this case, for you, terminal building, or even the airfield, and determine its cost, and then basically say the market rate is this, based upon your use of this space. And so in a compensatory model, the airlines pay for only the amount of space that they occupy, and it's more market-driven, it's more market-based. Again, it has to meet the litmus test of the FAA rates and charges policy, but at the end of the day, the airport assumes the financial risk of the overall operations of the airport. The hybrid approach is a mixture of residual and compensatory. And the hybrid approach is a methodology that we're pursuing through the new airport use and lease agreement with the airlines. And in this approach, the airfield, in other words, the landing fees that the airlines would pay, would continue to be calculated using a residual methodology. So for the airfield, the determination of cost to provide the airfield is made, and then net out of that would be non-airline revenues that would be associated with, for instance, general aviation landings at the airport, fuel flowage fees, whatever the airport decides to allow as a credit against the airlines for their landing fees. And then below that line would be the amount the airlines would end up paying in the landing fees based on their landed weight. In the terminal, it would be a compensatory model. And many of your tenants today pay more along the lines of a compensatory model. If you look at your rental car ticket counters and office space, the rate that they pay is more in tune with where we would see those compensatory rates today. So and today, under the residual approach, the airlines are paying less than what the rental cars pay because of the nature of the residual rate-making methodology. So it's this hybrid approach is a mixture of both methodologies. There's a balance of risk. There is still airline review of capital improvement projects in this methodology, but it is not as strict as necessarily a residual model would be. And the last distinguishing feature of a hybrid model, and one that has been presented to the airlines through our negotiations, is this notion of revenue sharing. So the notion of revenue sharing is today the airlines are basically benefiting 100% of the non-airline revenues that the airport generates. The airport is generating little to no cash year in and year out through its leases with the airlines. In a revenue share model, that's not the case. And what typically happens and what we've forecasted for past springs is a situation that at the end of every fiscal year there would be a true-up, if you will, and the airlines would get a certain percentage of net revenues that were generated in that year, and then the airport would get to, or the city would get to keep a certain percentage as well. And the reason that this is used at many airports, small hubs, beginning with small hubs and larger, is that cash that's generated is usually set aside by an airport to improve its days of cash on hand, which it would need to go to a bond market if there were ever general airport revenue bonds issued, or would use those generated revenues to fund capital projects that it would undertake that would benefit the airlines in many cases, and in the case of Palm Springs, that's the case. Those are kind of the three overarching rate-making methodologies that are at play today. There is a fourth, and we haven't put that on the screen, and it's rates by ordinance, whereby the local governing body, by ordinance, would set rates for the airlines year in and year out. It is the least preferred, it is the least collaborative nature of rate-setting methodologies. And we have not gone there yet, but under the FAA policy, an airport could do that if it could not reach agreement with an airline. And we're not suggesting that, but again, that's the fourth option. Turning to the next slide, I just wanted to give an overview of the current amended agreement. And I say it's amended, it was last updated in 2014, but the basis of the agreement and the business structure, as I indicated earlier, is about 20 years old. This agreement expires December 31, 2020. And as the city and Recondo set out to develop negotiations, we are attempting to target to have the new agreements in place January 1, 2021, which not only coincides with the expiration of this current agreement, but also is closely aligned with the occupancy of the ticket leasing project that is currently getting underway. So there are some strategic reasons for trying to align that, and that is primarily due to the way the space will function once the renovation project is complete. The airport actually will have additional square footage of space that it could charge the airlines for, and so it would be advantageous on the first day of occupancy of that space that a new agreement be in place that would recognize the airline's use and occupancy of it and payment of fees. The current, as I mentioned, I'm reading left to right across the top of the screen right now. The current business methodology is 20 years old. And so I think the most dynamic organizations and the progressive organizations would say let's peel back where we are, take a look at whether this methodology is going to carry us forward into the future, or whether we should look at something different. And so that's why we've stopped and had conversations with the city over the last year, and Tom and his team, and said, let's see about the possibility of different methodology. I mentioned too the residual nature of the deal today. The airport does collect some money towards capital projects, and it is written into the agreement. The floor of that is about $950,000 per year for capital projects. In many years, that money comes in, it goes out, depending on the scope of the projects. In some years, the airlines have said to the airport historically, we don't want our rates to go up, don't do any capital projects, hold on. And as a result, you've got some projects that should have been done some time ago that were held off in the operation. And as a result, you have some facilities, finishes, and so forth that need some attention and will need it going forward. And just the last 2 points, the residual nature does create a net remaining revenue of zero at the end of the year, and of course, the airlines do have authority to approve capital projects. Transitioning to the next slide, the city goals. And so the notion in terms of these negotiations, and we've been meeting with the airlines monthly since October of last year, presenting the airport's case for the next 5 years and a new agreement. And those negotiations thus far have centered around the cost per plane passenger, which I'll get to in a minute. But we've also developed a term sheet that's been presented to the airlines. We are in the process of working with the city to develop the first draft, if you will, of the agreement, and hope to circulate that to the airlines in the next several weeks to begin their review. But again, the impetus for looking at this alternative rate-making methodology was to fund capital projects and generate cash, days of cash on hand going forward. So that's what the revenue share would accomplish in a hybrid model. And the other goal would be to create more flexibility in terms of the airline review process. There are several carve-outs, if you will, today that the airlines can technically just vote the project down. And the more flexible approach would be, instead of a straight-out decline, would be to have a deferral of a project if the airline didn't agree with it. And that deferral period would allow the city, its consultants, to generate additional information and move forward with the project in the ensuing year. So turning a little bit to the forecast of key financial metrics, and our intent, and this is how negotiations typically occur with the airline when we begin a new business deal, is to look out 5 years. And so the next slide is a forecast of key financial metrics and some of the drivers for the airport over the next 5 years. In terms of operating and maintenance expenses, there will be, at least the city and the airport is of the understanding, that the California retirement system, there will be significant increases in required contributions to that state retirement program, that defined benefit program. And with the completion of the terminal modernization project, the airport will begin to assume the responsibility for a much more sophisticated, much more larger, if you will, baggage system that will be installed and be operational going forward. And so the costs associated with that and the California retirement system increase are two of the big operating and maintenance expense drivers that the city will face for the airport in the coming years. The non-airline revenue growth, the airport is growing, it has been growing. There's been positive gains in non-airline revenue categories: parking, rental car, food, beverage, and retail, and of course, most recently, rideshare fees that have been going up. And we see those continuing, and our forecast for those increase through the 5-year period. Capital expenditures, that's another area, and again, Because of some of the deferred projects, especially within the terminal building, and for some capacity issues related to the terminal building, i.e. the baggage claim area, the regional concourse, but just the overall finishes of the interior of the building, flooring, walls, carpeting, exterior of the building. There's projects that the airport have identified there that do drive the cost of providing the airport up in the next 5 years. So collectively, we take all of these financial considerations and we develop a forecast. And what we've done in the next slide, generated as an output, forecast of cost per enplaned passenger under the baseline residual. So the dark blue on the left represents the forecast of cost per enplaned passenger, assuming continuation of the baseline residual model, which the airlines requested that we provide. And then the more teal or aqua colored hybrid with the revenue share is associated with implementation of a new methodology. So you can see that in 2020, fiscal year 2020, the estimated cost per passenger is right around $6. And in the hybrid revenue sharing model, there is a more linear, if you will, increase in the CPE over the next 4 to 5 years, growing from just short of $8 in 2021 to $11.65 in 2025. The continuation of the baseline residual jumps in the first year to almost $10 and stays at about that level throughout, with the exception of 2023, which drops to about $8.05. And the reason the differences here are a function of just the capital spend that is forecast in those years. And so, and also with the revenue share in the earlier parts of the year of the term, the city has offered to the airlines that they keep a greater percentage of that ending revenue. But as it gets towards year 3, 4, and 5, it begins to balance out. And by the end of the 5-year period, there's a revenue share of 50-50. Let me just stop here and say unequivocally that the airlines have expressed concern about the increase in the CPE. I think Tom and his team, and we've tried to emphasize that today, that $5.99 is somewhat understated, and it should have been higher than it is today. Again, there was a period of time whereby the airport did not adjust rates and charges, did not change its capital spend, or did change its capital spend to accommodate the airline's request not to increase rates and charges, particularly after the economic recession. And the airport held those constant for that period of time. And while that benefited everyone in terms of service and everything else, what it had the effect of financially was tamping down, if you will, the true cost of the airport's infrastructure and services. And so what's really happening between 20 and 21 is the airport playing catch-up, if you will, for those years of holding the services down. And so bear in mind the growth in the CPE here for Palm Springs, but also recognize that, and this gets to the next slide, that this is Palm Springs' market position of cost per enplaned passenger based on a sampling of a number of airports across the country, from Greenville-Spartanburg to Myrtle Beach to Fresno, Ontario on the right side, and Savannah or so in the middle. As you can see, Palm Springs is way below, and this is data as of 2017, except for Ontario and Fresno. But you can see that Palm Springs has the lowest CPE of all of these, and it's considerably below the average of small hub airports at the time, which is the green horizontal line, and well below the average of all commercial service airports.
So Brian, I'm going to interrupt you a moment. This is David, the city manager. So why, given that data that you just indicated, which is good data, why are airlines going to be resisting this so much and already sort of started the outreach to everyone that the sky is falling?
Very good question. If you could flip back to the previous slide, it's that increase from 20 to 21 and then ultimately to 25. And so they just see that and see that increase in that early part of the transition. And it's a question of where do you want to put the increase? Is it early on in the years to absorb it? We've tried to smooth that increase out, particularly in the hybrid approach.
So would that make a difference to them? Would they prefer it lower and then higher, or are they just offended by the number, total number?
Anecdotally, I would say that it's a mixed bag. The airport is negotiating with 6 airlines. Some are fairly quiet, holding cards close to their vest. One in particular is very outspoken in terms of their opposition to almost any increase in CPE.
And who's that?
Others have admitted that, I can't go into exactly who, but just trying to give you a range of where the responses are. There are at least 2, maybe 3 that have accepted the fact that it's normal for costs to increase. They did ask for this smoothing out, if you will, of CPE.
Okay, all right, thank you, that answers the question.
Well, is one of the concerns, though, that a lot of the airlines are already into their planning cycle for 21 for their schedules and have factored the lower CPE into their calculations for certain routes or planned frequencies?
We have not heard that expressed specifically during the meetings, other than concern about the increase in the CPE. So it's been a more global concern versus anything specific related to setting budgets and schedules.
Next slide.
Are these on a calendar year or our fiscal year?
Fiscal.
Our fiscal year.
Go ahead. Brian, continue then?
That's it.
So, but just to clarify that on the fiscal year, so if in the negotiations you do see at FY21, again, it's somewhat difficult to reconcile calendar year to fiscal year and when the effective date of the new agreement would start. So if this agreement is in place by January 1, 2021, the airlines would not necessarily be paying the $795 or the $961 because the rates would not go into effect until such time as both parties signed the agreement and January 1 of 2021 would affect. So there is opportunity to try to smooth this out or smooth out any increases.
So, Mr. Chairman, we will keep you posted.
Continue.
Finance Committee? Apparently it's the end.
Was this the end of the presentation?
Yes. Do you want to take it to the finance?
Yeah.
Well, I have one question. On the hybrid side, obviously there are different splits. Here on the commission, we have always talked about a 75-25. Is that, are those numbers based on that?
I'm not sure where your slides are there in the conference room, but I'm on the cost per plane passenger analysis slide, which is number 8. Our modeling here shows in 2021, 65% would go to the airlines and 60% in 2022 would go to the airlines. Again, in 23, it would be 55%, and then 2024 and 25 would be a 50-50 share. We looked at, a model that would start at 75 and, decrease down to 50 by the end of 2025. And in looking at different models, more heavy loaded on the front end of the airlines beyond that 65%, the cities just would not be generating a lot more net revenue, if you would. And so what that would mean is that instead of using rotating its cash for short-term amortized capital projects, it would either borrow money from a commercial institution and run it that way. So, or it would not be able to build sufficient cash reserves if by the year 2026 it needed to issue general airport revenue bonds. So we struck with a 65, that previous 65 down to 50 to try to generate more cash for you in the long term.
And why that's important, if you, our bonding for the ticketing project was underwritten by PFCs. The car rental project, which will be quite expensive, is underwritten by CFCs. But the airport in its history has never used its own cash reserves to leverage some type of bond. So I think you appreciate where we're coming from on that.
Well, I have one more concern. Going back to the commission meeting on July 10, and Mr. Nolan in a PowerPoint presentation is telling us that PSB Airport, which stands at 464 in 2019 and is low in the industry, is anticipated to reach 823 by 2024. That is what we have been told, and now we're looking at $12. And I think we were talking about 75%. I think it's a given as the airline's responsibility declines, the CPE are going up. Isn't that correct?
Well, first, related to the material presented in last July. The material in last July, what's occurred since that point in time is that, notwithstanding the fact that the airport does not have an engineer on staff currently, Mark and Tom, when we began to ramp up and began to work with the airlines more closely, the airlines requested a more thorough review or a thorough listing of potential CIP projects. And so what has changed between July and today, and what was presented to the airlines, is that the request of the airlines for airport staff to develop a more thorough list of the CIP. So the CIP has increased since last July. And again, this is outside of the budget, obviously, for the city, but again, it's an approximation from airport executives and decision makers to the airlines to say, this isn't approved, but this is what we as professionals are envisioning that could be and under consideration for the next 5 years. And so that more detailed CIP was interjected into our model. We also learned the more, I think, the PERS cost increase was more clearly defined. And so we have refined those numbers since last July. And yes, they have gone up from $8 to $11. Now, obviously, if it's the city's decision to not go to such a high CPE, one area to look at would be reducing the capital spend. However, in doing so, it is just going to defray and delay, further renovation projects that are needed today relative to finishes in the terminal building, exterior treatment of the building, and so forth.
Well, I mean, when the commission voted to go with a hybrid model, we were assured at that time that our CPEs will be still well below by industry standards, which we have prided ourselves. And now we are looking at doubling CPEs. I find that very, very troubling.
Well, now, again, turning to the comparative slide on number 9, and I fully understand where you're coming from, but today, or as of 2017, the average, or the list of pure airports here, you can see they are below, and some are generally higher than you are today, and it is very conceivable that these other airports will see increases PSP, all things remaining equal, similar to yours, and that by the time 2025 gets here, effects of inflation and cost increases will push these bars higher for these other airports as well. And so all things remaining equal, PSP should be at or below the averages of these other peer markets.
David?
On the CIP, can we see, we referenced pre-July or July document and then post-July that there was a delta. Can we see at some point, not this minute, what the July baseline was and then what the delta is?
What I would like
In terms
to,
of projects and dollars,
Right.
not just dollars.
yeah. We can't really do a deep dive into it here today, but what I would recommend, what I would like to do is to pass this to the Budget and Finance Committee for more detailed analysis of this, also in terms of the impact that it has on the CPE, also to look at, whether there are opportunities for mitigation, and how that works within, within this model, and then hopefully maybe be able to come back to Recondo also to make some recommendations for the work with the negotiations with the airline, because obviously, given the forecast here, that is a great concern as the airlines, or as we're trying to convince airlines to increase their services or open new markets, all of these numbers enter into their calculations. And while we have an incentive program in place, that would be another aspect to look at, by the Budget and Finance Committee. How does that now impact that tool, basically?
The additional data that we need is does Recondo have any information on what's going on at these other airports and their increases? Because we're looking at a static chart. We're not looking at what improvements are going on in Ontario or Savannah. I assume that they also have capital programs and they have the same constraints that we have.
I think that was
Very true. On the one hand, benchmarking like this is a blessing. On the other hand, it is a curse because in many respects you see in one airport, you've seen it all. Savannah, for instance, I'm not sure what their CPE would do, but Savannah is a beneficiary of having a lot of land and a lot of land under lease to major corporations and manufacturers. And so they have the benefit of using those revenues that they garner off of those leases to assist with breaking down and lowering their airline CPE. Ontario and Fresno are probably more realistic. So the Ontario and the Fresno bars are not, as I indicated earlier, are not 2017, but are more 2019, 2020 timeframes. And they reflect, Fresno reflects the impact of their new agreement. So again, it's comparison to California airports, one just up the valley from you all, and the another similar sized airport in California, today are at that $12 plus level. So, and again, you've seen one airport, but those are two nearby facilities that I believe you oftentimes look at in terms of the comparables.
Yeah, but the issue is not so much today, but where will they be in 2025? Ontario, every airport I work with always has a big capital program and their costs go up. So while we may be at $12 in 2025, Ontario may be at 18.
That's correct.
And I think that's what we're having a problem grappling with, because we're looking at today, our costs going to $12 and saying, well, Ontario is only at $12. Ontario may be at 18, so we still may be in the same market position relative to other airports in 2025. But we don't have that info now.
Well, and I think that the greater concern is really the short term, the next, the next 2 years, I think as he was referring to, do we need to smooth out the increases to mitigate that jump? Recognizing that where the airlines are in their planning cycle, and that may be something that we might be able to address. But that's why I think the Finance Committee should take a closer look at this, and maybe then also look at additional data.
Can we get some feedback from the airlines?
And just one, excuse me, if I make one other point that the airlines brought up at our meeting last week, and that is they are convening on their own to weigh the possibility of forming a consortium, which would be a limited liability company that they would come together to form and assume maintenance of, for instance, the new baggage system. And on the theory that they do this, the airlines do this kind of facilities across the U.S., they bring some economies of scale to the market and perhaps do it for less than the numbers that we've been provided by the engineering team for the vaccine.
Yeah, so
that in itself, if that's successful, and you're able to take that out of the mix, that is another kind of smoothing opportunity, if you will, because it will decrease, their CPE, no longer having that expenditure or portion of the expenditure.
Yeah, so that's something that the committee might also want to take a look at, and maybe you can provide some more information then to them regarding what impact that would actually have. So, but I think we need to move on. Right. Thank you very much. I think very good, illuminating presentation, to say the least.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to sign off now if there's nothing else.
Take care, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
More to come on the subject, for sure. That was the alert for the city manager to provide his report.
Well, actually, I don't have a whole lot to convey, other than an offer was sent out for the marketing position candidate based on the subcommittee, the reviewing subcommittee's recommendation. We're still waiting to hear back if that offer will be accepted and keep you updated.
So we have a final candidate that was offered?
Yes, yes.
That's it. Thank you. Moving on to the Budget and Finance report.
Briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Yes, we've heard a lot of budget details, so just very quickly going to page 3 in the summary, which summarizes the 4 primary funds from the airport. The CFCs, as you can see, revenues are coming in ahead of where they were last year at this time, and the major expenditure in that category will be the design for the rail car facility, which is underway, and those costs will be coming in yet this year. The PFC fund, Fund 410, those revenues are ahead of where they were last year, again, because we've consolidated our debt service and we paid some things off early. So the PFC fund is trending very positive. And then the 415 fund, the revenues less expenses, leaves a surplus of about $2.1 million. But when you take a look at the Fund 416, that is short nearly $2.1 million. So that is one of the things that Brian was alluding to, the fact that we're virtually operating on kind of a break-even scenario, because the surpluses we have with the M&O go to pay our capital needs and our matching share program projects. So that reflects clearly how the current funding and the airline agreement goes now. So between those 2 categories, we have a surplus of about $58,000 year to date. And then the fund balances for the cash reserves, again, are pretty much as we had budgeted, and no real surprises in those categories.
Any questions to the report? Thank you very much. Discussion and action items. 11A was the new commission meeting dates and time. Tom, would you like to say anything to that? But it's in your packet.
It is in the package, and that's more of a chairman item.
Right, so the question would only be, is there, would anybody bring up a reason as to why we should not move to the new times, which the city council has agreed to be at 5:30 PM? And I believe that Tom would also recommend that we stay with Wednesday as the date of the meeting.
I will not be able to make it. I have city council meetings at 5 o'clock every second Wednesday of the month. So something would have to happen with the Coachella wrap.
Is there anyone else? David?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the list of boards and commissions from the city, and I think we're I mean, somebody could argue with this, but we are essentially the only business commission that's out there. Somebody could argue the planning commission falls into that jurisdiction, but I'm gonna argue that's not exactly the case. Like, for example, this presentation today would be asking a partner to be on the phone at, we started at 5:30 and had basically 45 minutes of prelim, which is essentially required. These people will be on the phone at 8:30 and 9 o'clock at night. That's a lot to ask. I don't know what the time zones are for other partners that we deal with on a periodic basis. I propose that we ask for a waiver to continue meeting at 8:30 on Wednesday mornings.
I'll second that.
And we have a member of the commission who has a government service conflict.
So would you like to make that a formal motion?
Sure, I'll make that as a formal motion.
Okay,
And I second.
and seconded. Is there any
8 or
discussion?
8:30, you said 8:30, but we can get 8. What do you mean 8?
Right. Misstatement,
Okay.
inadvertent.
Any discussion on this? Any questions? If not, then I'd like to call for a vote. And all in favor of asking for a waiver to maintain the same time and date for the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think what would be appropriate here is, since you made that motion and approved, we will put it on the next city council agenda. My sense it would be a receive and file. And if the council is interested in allowing that, they would direct us to do so. But what I would do is, and I'm just thinking through this, it might be helpful, we're going to write the staff report, but I think it would be helpful for the council to understand the reasonings of the commission, which obviously are valid from your perspective, and I want to make sure we capture that in the staff report. So I guess we will do a draft of the staff report, and potentially if we could have maybe the chairman or someone else you recommend review it to make sure we've captured the sentiment, and then we'll put it on the council agenda. I know they've had a request from a couple other commissions. They just felt they needed to keep it uniform for the reason of public participation. Agreed, airport is a little different. They may be open to that discussion, but we'll send it to council and we'll see.
Thank you.
Suggestion too. In my experience, I've found 2 occasions that it really does help to go and speak. You've made a good point. If you're available that evening when they consider that I think it really does help if somebody's there and makes the points that you made. Somebody goes and actually.
Oh, you mean at the
Yeah,
council
actually
meeting? Yes.
speaks.
Yeah, so would somebody volunteer? I mean, I think your point is very valid as far as not just somebody from out of town, but even some of the businesses that are in town that we might want to have here at the meetings. It would be more convenient to have it at 8 o'clock in the morning rather than at night.
And is the deadline for the exception or the length of time still to July 1st, or would this waiver take it past July 1st?
City Council wanted to allow a transition period, but we have this on the agenda actually next meeting, February 27th.
Thank you.
I won't be here that day, sorry. Somebody else can go raise the flag and I'll be on a plane.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Ken. Right, now we go to the item 11B, car rental agreement extension.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 11B of your packet is a car rental concessionaire extension recommendation. And the driving impetus, I'm sure most of you have read that, but the driving impetus is the fact we're in design on probably could be the largest capital improvement project in the history of the airport for the new car rental facilities. And it doesn't intuitively make much business sense to try to formulate a new RFP and go out when we have all of these dynamic moving pieces of the puzzle. It's common in the industry. Other airports have extended their agreements with the car rentals to accommodate changes in the capital program. And that basically is the recommendation here. And you can see the full report on 11B here. Scroll down just a bit. Yeah. So it would be it'd be the amendment of 1 year term with 4 one-year options to all car rental concessionaires. Now, we are hoping that the car rental project goes smoothly, but there are already some dynamics popping up as far as the siting of the facility because of its size. So, and that was already brought to the Operations Committee. I'll reserve that for Jan to be able to comment on that a little bit. But that's a recommendation at this point, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we have that item on the agenda, so I'd like to ask for the motion to...
Second.
Okay, discussion, questions? No discussion and no questions. So, in that case, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of accepting the staff's recommendation for a 1 year term with 4 one-year options for the rental car concession agreement, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? None. Thank you. Then we will go to 11C, Airport Parking Management RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 11C, I was not involved in that process, Mark. You were on the selection committee. Do you want to describe a little bit in referring to the report at hand as to what that process included and perhaps? Look, you can use a pointer if you wish.
Well, very briefly, it was a very interesting process. It was somewhat difficult. We received 8 very strong proposals from companies who've been in business at airports across the country, and the group evaluated those proposals and looked at various factors from customer service to experience to other things, and the financial piece, of course, played a part in that evaluation as well. And based on the evaluation team and the numbers that came in, you can see the ranking of the order with ABM slightly beating out the current vendor at Ace Parking. So over a period of a 5-year term, the difference in cost is just about $23,000 a year. Very close, and it was very interesting process. But all the evaluators look at things very objectively, and this was the recommendation of that group.
So, given what you heard this morning in comments, what is the process you've been dialoguing with procurement on this?
Well, the process is that this would go to the City Council for consideration at their meeting tomorrow. And the reason for that, of course, is there are various and sundry things that need to transpire before the actual switch date would be set for April 1st. So in order to work out those details, that would be the current schedule, that if council approves this, that we would move forward with the necessary transition for doing the interviews for employees and certainly looking at all the existing employees that are here and making as smooth a transition as possible.
So what I would note is, a yield to you.
I just wanted to ask what the legal meaning of that objection letter is.
Right, what is the impact?
So obviously we've had the, now just let me know, it's a policy matter. All things being equal, we're predisposed to take the lowest bidder, as you can appreciate. And there must be a really good reason to divert from that policy. So in this case, we've gone with the lowest bidder, determining that they're going to do it. Now, on the technicality parts, if they didn't do this and that, this is to be expected. from other bidders that don't get it. It's not unusual. So right now, the procurement director is evaluating their protest, if you will, and there's a process for that. And so I'll be hearing from the city attorney and procurement director a little later this morning on whether we would need to postpone it. So it's not unusual to postpone the action at council, which is tomorrow evening, till they can resolve the issue, and then we'll get back. Now obviously, it's always easier to keep the vendor you have. The transition, because you don't go through the transition issues, you know, all these other kinds of things. But that being said, we're obligated to look at the lowest and best bid, and that's what we've done here. So my sense is it may very well be removed from the council agenda for tomorrow. We'll get to a resolution on this, and I will report back to you of what the city attorney instructs.
So, is there any commitment from the new vendor that existing employees will be given first opportunity for the positions?
You know, I can't speak to that. I'm not sure what the law is on this. Like for example, in janitorial services, the law requires for the new vendor to offer positions. I have no idea if that's the case in this situation, but to the extent that's possible, we would welcome it.
But there's no requirement.
I'm not aware of that. I don't want to give you any wrong information.
But given the circumstances now and what we've been informed about, I think it might be appropriate then to not take action on this item on the agenda here. Look, otherwise it puts us in a difficult position to knowing that that the procurement department is reviewing this and that you might be pulling this off the agenda for the city council to begin with.
But I do have a question. If it's delayed, what's the effect of a delay? I mean, the deadline is when? It's April?
April 1st.
So
considering the fact that if the council were to elect to delay this for a period of time, they could actually take action at their next meeting. But waiting until the next April commission meeting, it would cause some serious challenges with trying to make all the transitions with hiring new employees, the bank accounts, the financial pieces that need to transition. So that would be very challenging to wait until Airport Commission reviewed this at the March meeting, and then council would, if council were to delay action until mid-March.
So we're being asked to approve the new contract.
Well, I understand the position you're in now, because there's a protest, and it's just a timing issue between now and your next meeting. Our options are two. One, we could have a special meeting to give it approval, or we could have some discussion, and the protest being aside, you have the staff report here, you could comment, staff can hear what the commission's concerns, comments are on the range of issues. So if we do have to go forward with into meeting the council before we have the benefit of coming back here, at least we're able to articulate what the commission's sentiments and concerns or encouragement is, one way or the other. So those are the sort of two options.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. So my understanding is over a period of 5 years, there's only a $23,000 difference between one contract and
Per year.
per year. Per year. Okay.
Per year.
Per year. So we're talking about $100,000.
Yes.
And if the commission voted not to approve the contract or made a recommendation not to approve the new contract, what happens?
Well, that's a legitimate position too. It's a struggle. The cost is minimal, but it still is a savings, and so. But if there's reasons to do it, I think it's fair to ask staff the qualifications of the other vendor. I mean, so it might be helpful to, in essence, get those questions answered for you now, so then you can have a better feel of maybe you may want to make a recommendation today.
Well, go ahead.
What's the barrier to extending the existing vendor for one more month so these things can play out? I mean, we've talked in the past 6 months about extending lots of things by many, many, many months. This is one issue that requires a month.
That's we could go to a month with the vendor if they're agreeable to that, and it gives obviously more time.
Absolutely, or agreeable to it, but hope that we'd also get an opportunity to come to the table and explain our proposal.
So I'd like to make a motion that we extend that we recommend the council that we extend the existing agreement 2 months to give staff time to analyze the protest letter and also to give this commission time to get a better understanding of what's going on.
I'll second that.
Motion has been seconded. Any discussion? Questions?
I would just note that that's a very doable recommendation. It's very common. I will just check with the procurement director to make sure if there's any other timeframes we have to do based on the other vendors. I don't know that it'll be an issue, but if you pass that resolution, we will remove it from the council agenda and proceed as directed.
Thank you. Okay. Jen?
Question, how long do you think the procurement officer will take?
I think probably within the next week, the issues could be resolved. But I think the larger issue still is, you don't have to go with we don't have to go with the lowest bidder. Now, if this commission finds, based on whatever criteria you ultimately want to consider at your next meeting and have a thorough discussion, you want to make a recommendation for an alternate bid, you're certainly within your rights to do that. From our perspective, we just need to make sure the process is fair for all. But again, your recommendation is going to be based on what you think is best for the airport.
I'm clear, I just wanted to make sure that your motion would be within the procurement. So I'm okay.
Right, and the question is, I mean, we have gotten some documents today also about the concerns of the current company and giving us some insight into what they think was missed on the other proposal. And I'm not sure whether we want to do this as a commission as a whole or whether the finance committee that is going to meet anyway wants to take a look at this. That might be a consideration as well. But in the meantime, the motion is on the table. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Thank you. So then that means that we do not take action on this item at all, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Item 11D, project update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just an update on the CONRAC, perhaps Chairman Yon of the Operations and Facilities Committee meeting, do you want to comment on what you heard last meeting we had on this?
CONRAC is
The CONRAC.
Consolidated
car rental. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Consolidated car rental. The Operations Committee met on the 27th of January, and we had a representative from Gensler who had some conceptual design drawings. And some background, there had been 365 days of data acquired from the car rental companies. There, of course, had been discussions with the car rental companies. So there was an understanding that to consolidate everything, including storage and ready return, and all of the functions, would take approximately 1.4 million square feet. And what Gensler did was, it was highly conceptual, but they blocked out the space that we were allocating for this. And it turned out that to fit 1.4 million square feet would take essentially 5 stories.
So in essence, to put this in context, you have the Hyatt at the end of your building here. So just to put that in perspective.
What you have is a CONRAC with an airport attached to it.
That was even better.
So we did discuss, and we had a motion within the committee itself to explore an alternative site. And that site was the area on Kirk Douglas, just down the road. And my understanding is that process is continuing, that the car rental companies will be met with sometime in the next week or two. and we'll see where that ends up. But if we were to cram what was needed into the space over here, you could go to at least one story underground, but of course now you're substantially increasing construction cost. Nonetheless, you could put something there, but it wouldn't really be any more square footage than what the car rental companies have today in terms of downstairs in the lots and the remote areas that they're using right now.
Just one correction, it wouldn't be equivalent to what they need today based on the reforecasting of that 365 days data.
Correct.
So it would still require some. So with that being said, the Gensler is in the process of analyzing that site. We provided them all the property boundaries and so forth. So we were in the design concept, basis of concept. So we are reformulating the alternative given the realities of the situation, either underbuilding or not being acceptable architecturally. So we're going to pass that by the car rentals through Gensler's concept and then probably report back to the operations committee about how receptive they were to that. Feasibility costs are going to be coming in also on that site.
So for those of you who've been here on the commission long enough, remember the update, the master plan update originally had one of that location as one of the alternatives for the car rental facility at that time, which the car rental companies didn't really like. And so that's sort of a revival of that concept again, correct?
And of course, one of the major issues would be shuttle buses.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, I just note that the goal of council still is to maintain rentals on this site, so you don't have to do the shuttle, but maybe it's some combination, and maybe it's not just built out for the next 50 years. Maybe the structure goes forward, but it's not the 6 foot floor behemoth. So it could be any combination.
The question, part of the consideration was, if you were to take the storage and wash facilities, whatever, off-site, that was not looked at as a viable solution for that?
No, I think that still has to be a discussion point with the car rental companies.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that needs to be explored,
yes.
Because, my only comment is if you go with the alternate designated site at Kirk Douglas, then you're talking about shuttle service. Once you go into a shuttle, the passenger is already inconvenienced. They don't care if they go a quarter mile or a half a mile or 2 miles. For all practical purposes, it could be on the other side of the airfield, once they get in the shuttle. So rather than just saying Kirk Douglas is the site, we should be having a thorough analysis aside anywhere on airport property. This Kirk Douglas site may very well be the best site for it, alternate site. But I think we would do ourselves a disservice if we wouldn't look at any potential property.
Okay.
But I think the preferred one in my book would be to work out something with the car rental companies where we go forward with what we have and they keep, the maintenance facilities and what have you.
So that concludes the report. So that schedule is going to have some modifications. Next slide, please. When we talk about the ticket hall, we're still on track for some pretty heavy-duty construction. May 1st, there's going to be other preliminary enabling construction. We're going to remove that gift shop in the lobby, and that'll be the temporary home for Alaska Airlines. That work will start as soon as March 1st. Building an IDF, which is the equipment room for all the electronics and that, and so forth. But the big brunt of the construction is still scheduled for May 1st. A lot of moving parts at this point in time that are taking up a good portion of our resources here at the airport today, and we are still very confident things are looking good at this point. So Next project would be the interior. I think everyone has seen the checkpoint. Did we have photos of that? If you could go back to that, that'd be good. I think you've seen at least there's 4 elements to the minor ticketing, the terminal remodel. This was early construction. That's a finished product. You can see by moving that it expands the depth of the site quite a bit. We now have more room for the ticket checkers here and the ones on the left. So pre-check right now is going to the left. This is the general boarding. Now, what we've done, if you see the divesting tables where you take your jackets off and other things, those are much longer now, and that was one of the key holdups. You're shaking your head, yes. So there's more expansive cubic feet there. It's more comfortable. Gives people more time to think about what they should do before they get to checkpoint. We've reconfigured the 5 machines. The 6th machine, we're waiting for the TSA to locate one, and we're working on that. So
Great.
three other elements. The police office is just about 90% complete. We've got some last minute items that once we opened up the patient, which is the building, metaphorically, we had some surprises. We're still waiting for automatic doors and some other counter and cabinetry for the widening of that hallway, so that will continue. And that schedule is going to vacillate a little bit, but pretty close to that, Mr. Chairman. Could you turn the lights on?
Great, so can segue right into the executive director and staff
Thank you.
reports.
So much else going on. The advertising concession, extension of that arrangement we've reported in the past. We're still negotiating with them on some level of extension. One reason we want to do that is the advent of the new car rental facility will provide a very attractive venue for additional advertising. As you're standing in a car rental hall, the real diamond for all airports is a baggage claim area where people are dwelling to wait for their baggage. In a customer service hall for car rentals, in this beautiful new customer service hall, there's also more dwell time. It's a perfect venue for more advertising and more revenue, which we need to help try to offset the rising costs of the CPA at the airport. So that gives us time to know the design of that facility and incorporate in about 2 years a new RFP, go out on the street, advertise the new facilities that are on the horizon and the existing facilities to potentially maybe upgrade this and generate more revenue. Our aircraft rescue and firefighting trucks are about to hit the street for the bid. The PFAS issue with the state mandate, that is also out to bid to come in and start doing investigation wells and other things and soil testing and so forth. Passenger boarding bridge specification is getting near. We're waiting on the consultant to finish that so that can go out on the street. Sustainability project tonight at City Council, you will see an action item to hire a consultant. If you recall our discussions, Mr. Chairman, about sustainability, that we appropriated some money working through the sustainability office who's taking the lead on this to hire a consultant to start formulating a plan for the conversion of turf given budget parameters, which is very important to what we just discussed earlier this morning. And interesting thing, the Desert Water Agency has a rebate program, and there's some other funding in there that the sustainability manager for the city has identified. There's talk of a garden that demonstrates sustainable plant types, and that would go somewhere probably in front of the building, so when people would come from all over the world, they would see a demonstration site, a large garden which shows the species and the different, and it's actually demonstrating to the general public. That wasn't our idea, it was the idea of the sustainability, and that's exactly what he should be doing. That's a wonderful thing. So that's proceeding. Parking contract transition, we talked about that, and that concludes my reports.
Thank you very much. Next, we've got commissioner requests and reports.
So, I guess 2 Wednesdays ago, Tom Nolan and I participated in the homeless survey. Over 100 people participated in it. It was an extremely moving experience. I interviewed a couple of people. Number one issue is affordable housing. People lost their housing. Once they lost their house, they lost their job. They're on the streets. But highly recommend that anyone interested in homeless issue participate in the survey next year, and you'll learn a lot.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Jan?
In the minutes, It stated that Mr. Smith reported that the operation committee moved to hire consultant Kinsler to look at modifying existing terminal facilities, etc. My question is regarding the cost. Making the motion, should the motion be referred here?
I was going to introduce that motion. I totally agree with you. And I'll make the motion that we put that item on the agenda for the next commission meeting in March.
Okay. Yes, so noted.
You second?
Second.
Okay, could you phrase the motion again, please?
Yeah, I'll show you.
Is that, we can't put them, no, you could just recommend.
He's
It's a recommendation, right, right. So we make a note of that. We can't make a motion. We can't make a motion on this.
It's not an
this item.
agendized item, but he's saying he's recommending for it to be on the next.
Right,
So
we
it's
can,
a-
it's a recommendation to agendize that item on the next commission meeting, yes. Mhm.
Comes opposite then.
Yeah. Please. Kevin.
I want to report out my observations from the concessions training session that took place on February 6th. Tom, do you have any comments just to put context on this, or should I just jump?
Well, it wasn't a training, it was a local outreach, was recommended by this commission. Mark, why don't you talk about the advertisement and how that was announced throughout the community to see if interested parties? Go ahead.
So now you want to put up that slide just real quick so that everybody can get a perspective. Taking a look, one of the most important things we have to look at is our concessions program here. I think everybody agrees with that. So taking a quick look on historical performance, the first bar graph is our passenger growth over the past 5 years. And the compound annual growth rate for the past 5 years is about 8%. Taking a look at the same time period on our concessions performance, that has grown significantly as well. In fact, the compound annual growth rate for that is 10.7%. So our concessions revenue and program has outpaced the growth of our passenger traffic. So we're taking a very close look at this, how we can improve the program, enhance the program, and make it more appealing for everyone who goes through the airport. Based on that, we did an outreach meeting, and in order to get as much interest as possible, we contacted all of the chambers in the valley, the Greater Coachella Valley, which includes Indio, La Quinta, Coachella, Cat City, Desert Hot Springs, and then the other chambers, Rancho Mirage, Indian Wells, Palm Desert, and Palm Springs. And they did an outreach with their membership. We also contacted the city, of course, Amy Blaisdell and Denise Colsby, and they helped us with the Main Street posting there, the city calendar. It was advertised twice in the Desert Sun publication. We had it on the city's website and also the airport website. We received significant interest. We had some major firms came to town, and the intent of the meeting was really to get those major players who would be expected to invest the most money to partner with the locals who are interested, just to make sure that everyone understands who is very interested and pair those groups together and create a list so that even if people did not attend the meeting, they can do an outreach directly to the national firms to make certain that everyone is aware of the local interest and the expectations that we have for the program.
Just a question on your number on the increase in the revenue. Do you also have a number on the increase per transaction?
I can get that number. I don't have it.
Would be just interesting to see whether the value of each transaction has gone up or it's just the volume. Thank you. Okay, Kevin.
So the intent was to orient local vendors to this whole RFP process. I think in our original discussions, we talked about a training session. We were concerned that local F&B and retail vendors would not have the experience to complete an RFP process. But for this, it really was focused on orienting them to the process. 4 national organizations attended, including our incumbents, HM Post and Parodies. I think there are another 15 or other people who also participated. Now, do you have a list?
Yes, there's a list here, not copies of it, but you say 27 total?
Did we make copies for everybody here who showed up?
No, you should know.
Okay, well, we'll get you the list of people who showed up. You recognize many of the folks, Destination PSP, Trio, Las Consuelas, the Escape Room, and others. Since then, we found out that other organizations who were not at the meeting are also having discussions, like Coffee on the Mark, F10, it's Mr. Lyons and Burba, Lulu's. They're having conversations with some of these national people as well. So Tom and Mark presented kind of the overview of this process and all the logistics involved in it.
Correction, we had Ricardo Associates here.
Oh, you're right, Ricardo
that
did. You guys did color
the
comments, right?
presentation.
So just a couple observations that I think are critical here. At one point in the presentation, Mark made the comment that this contract could go from 10 to 15 years, and it's because whoever wins these contracts is going to make a significant capital improvement, especially on the F&B side. I think, Mark, you mentioned the comment it could be up to $10 million. And I think that there was a settling effect to that when people realized, at least I realized, that there's no local vendor, except maybe one large restaurant organization, that would probably have the capital to do this. And so our intent of trying to have more local representation would only be accomplished by having local folks, retail or F&B people, partner with one of these national organizations, similar to the comment that we have here. The representatives for the national organization, several of them made comments where they said that they understand what our intent is and we're interested in trying to encourage partnerships with local retail and F&B people, organizations. So they realize that that's something that they hear that's important to us and it's something that they want to do. I think that one of the questions that I came up with is, how do you do that? And how do you facilitate that discussion? And while we have a list of attendees and contact information, we kind of left it that we can reach out to these national organizations and see if you can kind of connect with them. One thought I'd like to consider is, do we have another meeting, kind of a trade show type of piece that would allow local vendors to meet with these folks one-on-one and have opportunities to share what their ideas are, also listen to the national vendors and what benefits they could bring to this relationship. It's just an idea that I would throw out because I do think there's this kind of awkward piece about how do these folks who have an interest in participating here, how do they make the connection and how do the national vendors know who's interested in participating or not. So that's one idea. And then we continue to offer publicity and promote this next step for those people who are not able to attend. Here's some of the things that I don't know, and I just would throw it out for comment. One is that if 3 or 4 vendors participate in this RFP, is it possible for individual organizations, local retail or F&B people, to work with multiple vendors in a national proposal? Or do they everyone have to kind of pick one? It was unclear to me about how that would work, or if I owned a local restaurant, how would I partner and how would I do this when it came to working with these national organizations? The other question is, since we're using in phase 1 the existing real estate here for both food and beverage and the retail vendors, clearly the F&B is going to take longer to implement because of the capital improvements that we required. Is it reasonable to execute on the retail side of this, assuming they're split? And they may not be split. One organization may go for all of it. But is it reasonable to move ahead on the retail side, which wouldn't require as much capital improvement as such time, while you're waiting for the F&B to catch up and all the capital improvements required with kitchens and things like that? So I don't know the answer to that. And then there was this other discussion, and I'm going to let Mark talk about it, where there was this perhaps an advantage for minority vendor status. If you were a minority vendor, Tom, Mark, I'm going to throw this to you. There'd be some advantage, could be some advantage in participating in this, and it was unclear how that would play out for those who may qualify for that or whatever. So, Mark, we can throw it to you. Any comment on that?
What's called the ACDBE program, Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. It's an opportunity for someone who qualifies for that and has the certifications to participate in the program. Now, what does that mean? We plan to have 3 packages with the RP, one for food and beverage, one for retail, and then we have several blank slate locations. Jan, you have a question?
Excuse me. Are we starting an agenda item?
Yeah, because we're going too far, Mr. Chairman.
Are we starting an agenda?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Yeah, this is under the section of just commissioner requests and reports.
Yeah.
So we can't, can't really discuss it. I mean, you have, you had the report, right?
That's fine. That's the report, that's where he's saying, those are the three things that were unclear. And I think that, what I'd like to see, I'm not sure if you put this on the agenda or how we do this, Tom, but I'd like us to consider continued support and helping the local vendors to connect with the national vendors as part of this RFP process. Because I don't think anyone's going to be able to stand on their own to address any of these three. Maybe the third one would be open space and blank space, but not the food and beverage and the retail one. So I'd like to see us continue some of the support. And I think that was kind of the feeling coming out of the meeting.
To add to that report, the Director of Procurement for the city was there, and he did articulate that the RFP itself will identify three options: the big nut, the medium nut, and then the small ones that any local participant, the RFP itself will explain everything that he is commenting. And he was, the city's very good at their RFP processes.
So a local person will know the answer to that question?
Yes, when the local gets that RFP document, it will describe everything and what they have to do to participate in providing.
Well, let me just note, so airport concessions and airport parking are two of the most litigious RFPs out there. And so we just saw this with airport. So what we need to make sure is that we have a very fair process. What we are going to do, and we'll answer a significant amount of these questions, is in essence the pre-bid conference that we're going to have, and there will be a series of that. We will answer requests for information from any vendor, as many questions as we get. So in essence, by default, we're going to be able to assist whoever needs assistance. The information we provide will just be provided for everyone.
And in those conferences will be the large companies with the, that's where a lot of partnerships are also formed in that pre-bid process. That really draws people out on that. And we've got to do a good point as a commission on our website and the city website to promote this as the RFP, so everyone in the valley can click in and participate in that document. It'll be fair and open process.
Can you remind me when this is going to be released?
It's being worked on still, consultant, now that we've, our refinement, and we've had this session. We're talking within another 6 weeks of refinement according to the procurement director yesterday.
In 2 weeks.
The procurement director?
You said, well, what is the consultant going to provide, have us the final bid
Mark, go ahead.
documents?
Mark, go ahead.
I talked to the procurement department, we're hopeful to have this on the street at the end of the month.
Can we get
This month?
Yes, February.
Can we get an updated schedule of the complete process end to end for this? So we don't have to go digging through old emails, and it sounds like we didn't know exactly when the RFP would hit the streets, but now that we have a time frame so that we can track it. I'm not good at going back to emails of 5 months ago.
What I'd suggest is that we actually agendize it for your next meeting.
I was going to say that.
Because the RFP will be out at least 3 months. So obviously we'll get on the next meeting, and all the background information, and then obviously there's refinements that can be made, if you want to.
And can we build into that timeline the possibility of an objection, so we don't wind up in the same situation with the parking? Because
Objection?
An objection to the final procurement result.
Oh, that's in there automatically.
Okay, well, it didn't seem to be for parking.
Oh, no, it is. It's part of the, and
Well, we got
process,
parking.
yeah.
It's the normal procurement process. It's
Yeah.
That's why it's so litigious.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Any other reports? None? Thank you. Past city council actions, I think they're in your packet. Future city council actions, I think we talked about those. Any correspondence? Any correspondence? No? Thank you. And we'll receive and file the airline activity report. You had that in your on the emails, etc. You noticed there was a slight decline in January, 1.some%. I noticed that Delta was very strong on the positive side. Together with Alaska and American, they really compensated basically for the declines in other areas. The Canadian traffic in particular was down. I'm not sure how that correlates with capacity, but certainly something that we need to keep an eye on. I think the MAX, the Boeing Max still has an effect on all of this. So we'll hopefully reverse that downward trend in the next couple of months, which are the peak months. The airline schedules were also part of that report. And next meeting is on March 11. Nadia, I'll ask for my excuse right now because I'm a little busy at that time with a small event that we're having. Well, then I'll call for adjournment. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much.